Hello, folks. Please move towards your seats. We're getting ready to start the program. Thank you. Okay. All right, Gallatin County Democrats, one more welcome and thank you all for being here with us tonight. We're ready to turn this county blue and even darker blue in 2020. I'm going to start by thanking all of our volunteers, our Gallatin County Central Committee members, Jennifer Blossom, our wonderful county treasurer, for doing the tables and the flowers, and everybody, you know who you are, led by our fearless leader, the chair of the Gallatin County Democrats, Elizabeth Marham, for working hours and hours and 365 days a year to make these types of events happen and to get Gallatin County, get Democrats elected in Gallatin County. I also have to say thank you off the bat to JP Gabriel and Film Lights Montana for donating his equipment and expertise to make this event happen. Thank you, JP. I would also like to take a moment at the beginning here to express gratitude. Would like to acknowledge the gratitude we have towards the many indigenous nations who call this valley their homeland. Many thanks to the Blackfeet, Crow, Shoshone, and others who have lived here since time immemorial and protected the waters, land, air, and animals. May we proceed with the spirit of respect and generosity that these nations have displayed. All right, folks. Now we're going to introduce again our candidates. These are the individuals that are collectively fighting for your vote and fighting for your values and are going to help turn Gallatin County and Montana blue in 2020. To begin, we have our candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives, our sole seat in Congress. First, we have Tom Winter. Welcome, Tom. And Kathleen Williams. Our candidate, our Democratic candidate for State Superintendent, Melissa Romano. My two brothers from the legislature, Bryce Bennett, our candidate for Secretary of State. Shane Morgeau, candidate for State Auditor. Kim Dudick, candidate for Attorney General. And Rafe Graybill, candidate for Attorney General. We also have our local legislator and Democratic candidate for the Public Service Commission, Tom Woods. Our candidates for Montana House of Representatives in 2020. We have Ed Staffman running for House District 61, or 62. Kelly Cordum, candidate for House District 65. Alice Buckley, candidate for House District 63. Also my fiance, lucky me. Jim Hamilton, candidate for House District 61. And Denise Heyman, who is running for her 4th term in House District 66. Chris Pope, candidate for Senate District 32. Excuse me. And then our last two, but not least, certainly, we have Sandy Earhart, who's running for Clerk of District Court as a Democrat. And yours truly, Zach Brown, I'm running for Gallatin County Commission. Here you have it, folks. These are your people. Treat them well. Give them our thanks for putting their necks out there to protect democracy and stand up for our values. One more round of applause for these wonderful humans. Thank you all. Well, our candidates are leaving the stage. I've been asked to make kind of a interesting announcement. There was news today that our elections office received some petitions for putting the Green Party on the ballot. And while we don't know the details yet, we know that in the past, these efforts have actually been funded by dark money right-wing groups to harm Democrats on the ballot. So the announcement I would like to make is that watch the news first and foremost and see how this plays out. And the Gallatin County Democrats will be keeping a close eye on how this unfolds. But if you signed one of these petitions downtown or at the co-op or elsewhere, it is everyone's right to petition the elections office to remove your name from those petitions if you would like. So that's your right as a voter, something to consider, and keep an eye on that issue moving forward. One more time, I have to say that this is our opportunity to invest in ourselves and our values. Thank you for everyone who has already contributed, but in each of your seats you have a remittance envelope. I was told to clarify our match goal tonight. If we reach $10,000 in donations tonight, that will trigger an additional $5,000 anonymous donation. So our goal is to get to $15,000. What does that mean? That means that if you as an individual wanted to donate to Tom Woods for PSC or to Jim Hamilton for House District, all my numbers, 61, you have an individual contribution limit. There is no individual contribution limit to the Central Committee, and what we would like to do is turn around and max out our donations to all of our candidates, which are at a higher level, and turn your dollars into results for Gallatin County voters. So please consider investing in our Central Committee and in all the efforts that this place and these folks put into turning this county blue and really making Gallatin County the center of the universe statewide for getting Democrats elected in Montana. Last year we did it. We sent John Tester back to the U.S. Senate. We had record turnout in this county. But it didn't happen by accident. It happened because folks volunteered. You all showed up. We had volunteers all over the place, and we had people investing in candidates. And we had somebody, I might add, at the top of the ticket, the big man, Senator Tester, who really, truly believes in investing in field, and that was an amazing thing. And hopefully we can all learn from that and continue that momentum. So with that, I'm done. Next, I would like to just invite our moderator to the stage, Mike Wheat, who is a luminary in this community. Mike served as a Montana State Senator in the early 2000s, and most recently retired from the Montana Supreme Court. Mike, take it away, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good evening. I need a mic. Hello? There. Good evening, everybody. I feel kind of like a DJ up here, the way I'm sitting here. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to do here, these are the Senate candidates that we're going to do first, and then later on we'll do the gubernatorial. All of the candidates sent in a bio, a short bio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the candidates. I'll read their bio and then introduce them to you. So that'll take a short period of time, and then once they're all on stage, I will start asking the questions, and they will each have 1 minute to answer those questions. So that's the format which we're going to follow. So with that, let me get started here. The first candidate is John Muse, a fourth-generation Montanan. John grew up in a single-parent household in Helena, Deer Lodge, and Wolf Point, Montana, before being nominated by Montana congressperson to the U.S. Naval Academy, from which he graduated with academic honors. An active duty naval officer, he was 4 times deployed and entrusted with the lives of thousands of people during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He then served his country again as a high school math and English teacher at the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. Since, John has been a senior engineer in the business sector with an MBA from the London Business School, and has owned and improved an operating cattle ranch in Montana. Please welcome John Muse. And I must say, I apologize for reading this, but I couldn't get it all memorized in time. Next, Wilmont Collins. Mayor Wilmont Collins came to Helena, Montana, as a refugee 26 years ago. He's juggled multiple jobs all at the same time, including a 22-year military career, a teacher, social worker, child protection specialist, a veterans outreach coordinator, a 2-year college professor, and mayor of Helena. In 2019, he was named one of the Carnegie Corporation's best immigrants. He has spoken at the UN High Commission on Refugees and the Academy of Cultural Diplomacy's 30th anniversary Fall of the Berlin Wall celebration. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science, a master's degree in human resources, and has completed his coursework for a PhD in forensic psychology. Please join me in welcoming Wilmont Collins. Cora Newman. Cora, a Bozeman native, is a public health leader and public lands expert with 2 decades of experience improving access to health care, expanding economic development, and protecting access to public lands. She launched the Global First Ladies Alliance in partnership with the offices of First Ladies Laura Bush and Michelle Obama. The organization empowers First Ladies around the world to stay accountable to hardworking families and use their power to do more for their constituents. She served at the State Department in the Economic Bureau, where she focused on job creation, economic diplomacy, and women's economic development. She advocated for access to parental leave and promoted women's entrepreneurship across the globe. Cora lives with her family in Bozeman, surrounded by 4 generations of family, from her grandmother and grandfather to her 2 children, Timea and Levi. Please welcome Cora Newman. Mike Knowles. Mike is a mathematician with revolutionary ideas on how to fix our country. Born and raised in a small town has not stopped him from developing big ideas. Mike's plan for change includes fixing the economy, reforming education, and catching those people our country keeps letting fall through the cracks. America is a democracy, and it should not be run by lawyers and businessmen. I'm a lawyer, and that's tough. That's tough on me. The only way to fix the mess we are in is through bold action and comprehensive change. Mike Knowles will stand up in the biggest way possible to make these changes. Please welcome Mike Knowles. I think I scared him. Last but not least is Josh Seckinger. Josh chose to make his home in Montana 11 years ago. Florida-born and Wisconsin-raised, Josh settled in the Gallatin Valley at the age of 23 and has worked a variety of jobs: seismic mapping, exploration, food delivery, and working for an environmental lawyer. For the past 5 years, Josh has worked as a fly fishing guide on some of Montana's most precious resources, including the Smith, the Madison, and the Yellowstone rivers. Based out of the Bozeman area, but often on the road for work, Josh has worked in and around Sydney, White Sulphur Springs, Twin Bridges, Billings, Culbertson, and the Flathead Valley and beyond. Frequent travel and a love of the outdoors helped him learn about Montana, while his engaging and extroverted personality helped him learn about its people. Josh has gained a unique perspective about life in Montana, the needs and wants of everyday working Montanans, and the best path forward for the state, based on years of simply talking, listening, and engaging with the people of the Big Sky country. For Josh, one thing is abundantly clear. Montanans believe we must ensure the last best place stays that way. Please welcome Josh Seckinger. You guys ready for this? I know the crowd is, and I know I am. Okay, we're going to start on that end, and John, I'm going to ask you the first question, and then we'll work our way down. John will answer first, and then after that, you each have 1 minute to answer the question, okay? First question, it's about health care. President Obama's Affordable Care Act has provided vital health insurance coverage to 20 million Americans, including 45,000 Montanans. The Republicans seek to eliminate the ACA and its protections for pre-existing conditions, lifetime coverage caps, and other critical benefits. Access to health care is a voter priority. What health care policies do you support and why?
First of all, I want to thank you, Mike, everybody at Gallatin County Democrats for putting on this fantastic event. Thank you so much. This is exactly what we need. We need to vet our candidates. Otherwise, we're going to lose in 2020 to Senator Daines. So thank you all, and thank you for being here. So this is absolutely one of the biggest hot topic issues in the presidential race, what have you. The first thing we need to do is beat Senator Daines and make sure these attacks, incessant attacks on basic healthcare coverage for those with pre-existing conditions are stopped in their tracks. But I think the framework is false. The idea that you need to be Medicare for all, or you need to be public option, or you need to be simply incremental change with the Affordable Care Act, that is a false notion. I wish, honestly, the presidential debate was geared in a different direction. Because ultimately, the question is, do you believe healthcare is a human right or not? I do, and whether we can hit a home run, let's do it. But if it requires, because of political constraints, to stay within the bounds of a public option or incremental change to the Affordable Care Act, we need to do that too. We need to be pragmatic, but at the same time, we need to move the chains down the field towards the ultimate idea of healthcare as a human right.
Thank you, John. Wilmont.
Thank you, Gallatin County Democrat. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for coming. Healthcare is a human right. I am in full support of the Affordable Care Act. But with the way we're going presently, with the way the Republican government is tearing it apart, what they're telling us is they do not care. Now, what we need to do as Democrats, as citizens of Montana, my family benefited from the ACA, and I'm going to do my darnest to keep the ACA moving. But if they should, by any means, damage it to the point where we can't see our way out of this, when I get to the Senate, I will be able to read every bill, every health care bill, and make a decision that will be best for Montana. And that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Thank you. I'll echo the thank you to the Gallatin County Dems. I'm happy to have you all here in my hometown of Bozeman. I grew up actually right down the street on South Grand, and we have lots of family here tonight. So thank you all. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Zach. Healthcare is very personal to me. I lost my father in a lumber mill accident when I was a baby. And if we had been closer to specialized care and the care that he needed, he may have survived. When I travel this state, I hear from families across the state about the critical needs they have in healthcare. Some Montanans are driving up to 5 hours to reach the care they need. We have, right now, Medicaid expansion under the ACA has helped bring critical care to 10% of Montanans. That's close to, I think it's actually closer to 90,000 people are covered by Medicaid expansion. It's something that we must protect. Our junior Republican incumbent, Steve Daines, has regularly attacked this coverage, which is so critical to the survival of families across Montana, families like mine that needed that care. It's unconscionable. As senator, I would protect Medicaid expansion. I would vote for a public option, look into a public option, into a Medicare buy-in. One of the other things that our Senator Daines has stood by and watched is this administration taking aim at both Medicare and Social Security. Healthcare will be a top priority for me in the Senate, and I look forward to serving you.
Thank you. Mike?
I believe in the words of our forefathers and the words of our ancestors. And when the founders of this nation stood up and wrote the words that we have inalienable rights, including the right to life, that is what they were talking about. The way that we treat people in this country, the way we treat sick people in this country is unconscionable. We need to do better. And I believe that the people of Montana are that group of people who can stand up and have those ideas. When I built my platform, what I did is I went around to everybody around me, every person that I met at the bar, everyone that I met at the gym, everyone that I could possibly talk to, and asked them about politics. And the solutions we came up with are not the current solutions that we have right now. We cannot continue down this path of spending tomorrow's resources on today's expenses. So first we need to get our budget in order. And then we need to start talking to people across the aisle, because I guarantee you that if you go talk to Republicans, they agree that healthcare should be affordable, and we can convince everybody in this state and in this nation that healthcare should be a human right, as everyone else on this stage agrees.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
Thanks, everybody. I'd like to thank the Gallatin County Democrats for having me. I announced on Tuesday, so it's a real honor to be here. You know, as a fishing guide, I believe I may be the only person on this stage who ever shopped for insurance on the marketplace, the Affordable Care Marketplace. And I'm sick and tired of choosing between a policy that simply prevents bankruptcy or slowly causes it. I'm absolutely in favor of a public option moving towards a Medicare for all system. This country needs to guarantee health care for our citizens. It is absolutely a human right. And we can get it done. That's it. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Josh. That's how you answer a question in under 1 minute.
Yes.
Really quick.
All right. The next question, and we're going to start with you, Wilmont, is related to prescription drugs. Prescription drug costs are a constant worry and stress for all Montanans. What are your policy solutions to address the high costs of prescription medications?
We need to put regulations on Big Pharma. But before we get there, we, the people, provide the research for prescription drugs. We, the people, provide the financing for prescription drugs. And then what happens? Other countries have it cheaper than us. Why? If we're providing everything it takes to make those drugs, it should be cheaper for us. But if we have to go to Canada and elsewhere to get those prescription drugs, something wrong with that. That's why we need to regulate Big Pharma. Big Pharma is killing us. And that's what I intend to do. We must regulate those pharmacy agencies that we provide assistance to make the drugs, and then we pay for it. So,
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Thank you for the question. We have a situation right now where 1 in 5 Montanans is foregoing medicine, critical medicine that they need because of pharmaceutical and drug prices. We have a situation where the research that is going into this is costing more than it needs to. We need to regulate, as I agree with Wilmont, we need to regulate pharmaceutical drug prices, pharmaceutical research. Right now we have a situation where insurance companies, hospitals, and the pharmaceutical industry are all passing costs down to patients. What that leads to is critical shortages. In some cases, families are paying up to $1,000 to get insulin. This is something that absolutely needs to be addressed. It's part of reform. We have a House bill that's been introduced, one of many bills that's sitting dead on Mitch McConnell's desk, which is one of the reasons we need to flip the Senate. But there are proposals out there that are creating a competitive marketplace for drug prices and for the pharmaceutical industry. We need to flip the Senate so that we can pass those bills and stop allowing corporate interests to pass the costs on to patients.
Thank you, Cora. Mike?
Of those plans that I've been talking to local, everybody around me that I can, one person I met, an inventor over in Livingston, told me of an idea we discussed through called the Anti-Gouging Act. And the Anti-Gouging Act would prevent corporations or anybody from gouging, right? When we have a hurricane and the water prices suddenly go up astronomically, or when this helps with, and this ties in here to the healthcare, to the drug prices, is if we are able to keep issues like drug prices and single-use drug containers in healthcare systems that cost 700,000 times what they should, then we're never going to get anywhere. But beyond that, if we really want to start digging into these issues, we need to go even deeper than that. And we need to end corruption in our government. We need to end the corrupting influence of money that allows companies like Big Pharma to get in there and buy laws that we as citizens do not have the ability to do as well.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
All right, I'm going to shoot for the full minute. Prescription drug costs are, it's an interesting topic for me because my insurance is so bad that I couldn't go get a prescription if I wanted to. I have that bronze plan thing where it's going to prevent bankruptcy, but it's not going to do much else. I think it is absurd that the government cannot negotiate with pharmaceutical companies for prescription prices. It is absolutely absurd. I think that's the first step in this situation here. Outside of that, I'm 34 and healthy, thank God, and haven't had a whole lot of experience with this, but I'm absolutely willing to learn what will work for everyone in this room. I think that's what differs me from everybody is I'm willing to say I don't know and hear it from you. And this is one of those topics where I don't really know. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. You still made it under a minute. John?
This is a topic that impacts everybody, not just our seniors. For the last 4 months or so, my wife and I have essentially lived in a hospital next to our newborn son recovering from a life-threatening illness. And the first tranche of bills we received was $80,000, one of many to come. I absolutely understand our healthcare issues, but on the very specific topic of pharmaceutical drug pricing, we need to do something emergently. There is a current crisis right now. We need to make sure that seniors are not choosing between food on the table and taking their prescription drugs. We need current legislation that addresses this situation now, and then we need to look at this in a more macro way. We need to make sure that indeed we can negotiate, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, VA, what have you. We need to make sure that we can leverage economies of scale to truly drive processes costs down and also aggregate our negotiating power as different entities, and that could, in the short term, include private entities. As one monolithic negotiating power, we can radically reduce prescription drug prices. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question is about minimum wage, and we start with you, Cora. The federal minimum wage has been $7.25 since 2009. Montana's minimum wage recently increased to $8.50. California's is $12, and in some cities, it's been raised to $15. As a senator, would you support an increase of the federal minimum wage, and if so, to what amount?
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I think I mentioned earlier, I was raised by a union carpenter. My stepfather, who my mom met here in Bozeman when I was 6, was a union carpenter, and I would not be here without those union wages, those good wages. We have families across the state. Montana has a low unemployment rate, but we are at the top, the bottom 10% in terms of level of wages. We have a huge outdoor recreation industry and tourism industry. 50,000 workers in that industry are not making wages that they need to live. Families are working 2 to 3 jobs to put food on the table. There are some incredible plans out there, again, dead on Mitch McConnell's desk, that are focused on a staggered minimum wage. Here in Montana, we have 10,000 small businesses. This is the home of small businesses and entrepreneurs. 10,000 small businesses that are with owners that are about to retire. There are federal incentives that we can put in place that help ensure that those businesses stay alive, and don't just keep them alive, but help create incentive programs for better wages for the workers that are coming to keep our rural communities across the state, like many rural communities across the country, thriving.
Cora, would you raise it, and if so, to what amount?
I would not have one standard federal minimum wage raise. I would have a staggered wage. There are plans out there that take into account the locale that they are actually raising the wage in, right? So it wouldn't be a blanket $15 an hour. It would be staggered based on the businesses in that area.
Okay. Mike?
First, to answer your question, I am not a proponent of raising the minimum wage, but if it were brought to me from the rest of my party or from the other side of the aisle either, then I would vote for it. It's not something I'm against. I just believe that there are better ways to do this, because right now, talking about minimum wage is missing the point, because when we have... It's missing the point because not everybody works and not everybody can work. And so my plan would be to implement a universal basic income. That's what I would do. And at the same time, yes, we do need to worry about wages, and we do need to worry about issues about, corporations having some of the worst practices, and we need to take the burden of health care off of employers so that, number one, when you lose your employment, you do not lose your health care and you do not lose your basic income. And at the same time, you set up a system where, in my version of universal basic income, I tie it to education. So to increase the amount that you need, if you lose your job, you can go back and get a better education paid for by the government.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
The idea of minimum wage means I would pay you less if I could, but I can't. I'm 100% in support of a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour with an increase for inflation every 2 years. Do I need to take the rest of the minute, or are we there? Let's get some more questions.
Thank you, Josh. John?
So I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I think I'm the only person on this stage with any substantive business experience. So let me talk about this from the standpoint of a business. I fully support a federal minimum wage of $15 per hour everywhere, and states can increase that as they need. But I will tell you from a business standpoint, and Senator Daines will hit every single response up here mercilessly, and he will get every single small business owner to agree with him, and we will lose the election. We need to make sure that a government subsidy helps small business owners adjust for their cost structure, which would rise with a higher minimum wage. I grew up in all sorts of little small Montana towns, Deer Lodge, Wolf Point, I live in Loma. I've been up every single place you can think of in Montana. And when cost structure increases, owners actually put out a mea culpa, asking their customers for forgiveness, even if it's 5 cents. We need to raise the minimum wage to a federal $15, but we also need a government subsidy to help small business owners scale that nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wilmont?
I support $15 minimum wage. I've said that from day one. But let's look at, we have to realize that the stock market is not our economy. Because there are lots of people, there are 42% of Americans that are involved with the stock market, but the 1% really take care of the stock market. The other 57, 58% that are not in the stock market, how do we compensate them for that? How do we uplift the economy? And people are saying, oh, small businesses will go out of business. No, they won't. People will look forward to going to work. People will work. Right now, if I have to choose between a $7 an hour and going to my wife's graduation, I'll go to my wife's graduation. But if I have to choose $15 and go to my wife, we will have to negotiate. So yes, $15 an hour is where I will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilmont. All right, our next question, and we'll start with you, Mike, is related to women's rights. One of the primary strategies implemented by the Trump administration to attack women's rights and equality is nominating ultra-conservative judges to the federal court system. As of February 12, 2020, 190 judges have been confirmed, and I can guarantee you one of them is unqualified. And 31 nominations are pending. These are lifetime appointments that would impact women's access to health care for decades. Confirming federal judges is one of the many actions senators take that impact women? As senator, what actions will you take to advocate for women?
Well, first of all, I would try everything in my power to protect Roe versus Wade, which is what the Republicans are trying to do right now with these nominations. That is their end goal, is to get enough judges that will help them overturn Roe versus Wade. So first of all, we need to protect that. Another issue that's very local and close to Montana is the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We need to reprioritize how we are treating minority groups, including Native Americans, including women, including all of these people. And we need to start bringing those resources to the places they need to go. And we cannot start fixing these issues like protecting Roe versus Wade until we get rid of corruption in our government. We cannot continue the way we are running right now. We need to end the lobbying power. We need to get rid of gerrymandering issues. Everybody knows we need to do these things. We need to start implementing ranked choice or score choice voting options. We need to get dark money out of politics. These are the things that we need to do first, and then we can absolutely start bringing this money and these resources in to help these girls and these women that we need in our state, because Montana does not have the resources alone to do this, and I will fight for that issue specifically in the Senate.
Thank you, Mike. Josh, you ought to be able to go a minute on this one.
We'll see. I love Mike's passion. Yeah, definitely. You know, I know I'm not alone in this, but I was raised by a single mom, and, you know, that's, okay. We absolutely need to support Roe versus Wade with nominating and appointing liberal judges. We also need to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. For God's sakes. We're at 38 states. Let's ratify. It's about time. You know, I'm not going to go a minute or I'm going to cry. Mom, I know you're watching. I love you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you for your passion. John?
So my classmate at the United States Naval Academy was Amy McGrath, and she is taking on Mitch McConnell. And both Amy and I regard our races against, respectively, McConnell and Senator Daines as a continuance of the mission and service to country. And part of that is to make sure that women are properly valued and empowered. When women are empowered, nations rise. That's a simple fact. When women are empowered, communities rise. So let's get back to McConnell. Not only is he pushing right-wing ideologue judges through that put women's health, women's safety at risk, but there are basic things on his desk right now. Equal pay for equal work. Let's get that done. What about making sure that we reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act? Make sure that happens. Let's make sure that red flag laws, and this is a gun safety issue, let's make sure that targeted red flag laws are implemented so women are not at risk from a disgruntled spouse, a disgruntled partner. There's so much we can do, and I was honored to be here in Bozeman for the Women's March, and then I went straight over to Helena
You're done,
and
John.
hit that as well. Thank you.
Wilmont?
I believe in a woman's right to choose what she does with her body. Now, I remember traveling the state, and I was speaking to a group of, a cross-section of the people, and this 17-year-old came over to me and said, and asked a question, and she said, "But aren't you a Christian?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "So why would you support a woman's right to choose?" I said, "Because it's not my business. It's with her, her family, and her God." So there are a lot of the candidates up here tonight have stated that we need to do more. we have consistently not treated everybody with the same respect. Women are considered less than. When we talk about equal pay for equal work, pray tell me why, if we're doing the same work, why aren't we getting paid the same? But there's a solution to that. There's a solution to each and every one of these things that the Republican government is doing that we can solve. But we have to get into the Senate first. If we don't get into the Senate, these rogue judges will continue to make these rules and regulations that will affect us. We need to get there, and we need to get there by electing me.
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Thank you for that question, and I'm very happy to be surrounded by 4 men here who support a woman's bodily autonomy. So thank you. I'm going to use this point. I think it very likely goes without saying that I am very pro-choice, and I have spent my career focused on empowering women not only through healthcare, access to healthcare, but economic empowerment, leadership, et cetera. So happy to talk and get into that. But really what I want to point out is the dangerous leadership we have in Steve Daines and potentially Gianforte as our governor. So Montana has some of the strongest privacy rules in our Constitution. We are a state that respects privacy, and it's something that's mandated by our Constitution. Yet we have a senator, Steve Daines, who was the first senator in U.S. history to introduce a pro-life caucus in the Senate. We have a potential governor or a governor candidate here in this state who is hoping would aim to implement a religious agenda on the state. It's totally out of touch with Montana. Montanans respect privacy. Montana women are strong, and we will fight for this right. My hope with this race is that we bring the resources and support into the state to not only support the senatorial race, but the governor's race, because so much is at stake.
Thank you. Okay, you get to start this time, Josh. This one has to do with education. Access to high-quality public education is the bedrock for opportunity and equality in our country. The National Student Loan Program has afforded many the opportunity to attend college. However, the program can leave students with high-interest debt and limited opportunities to earn the income necessary to repay those loans. These financial realities decrease and deter access to our higher public education. As Senator, what policies will you support to promote access to high-quality public colleges, universities, and trade schools?
Thanks for that question.
I knew you could answer this one.
Oh, man, this is a good one. You know, I don't have an advanced degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I dropped out of college at 111 credits. And the reason I dropped out was because my loans were so crippling at that point that I couldn't continue to go to school. I couldn't get more loans to continue my education. Thankfully, I found a career that it doesn't matter if I have a GED or a PhD, I make the same amount of money. It's not that big of a deal these days, but as senator, I advocate for debt-free college. Thank you. You should be able to go get an education and not mortgage the rest of your life paying for it, especially if you're not going to be an engineer or a doctor or another engineer. Thankfully, there's no lawyers up here. That's shocking. Apologies. So student loan debt is one of those decisions that I have to make with my paycheck. Do I pay this? Do I pay that? What gets paid this month? So I'm absolutely for debt-free college, and we can find a way to pay for it. Republicans find a way to pay for everything. Let's find a way to pay for some things. We're Democrats. We pay for good things. I'm going to sit down.
Thank you, Josh. John?
So, as the only Montana public school teacher in the United States Senate race, I taught in a federally designated low-income school district in one of the nation's and Montana's most challenged areas, on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation at Hayes Lodgepole High School. And I want to thank Montana State University because that allowed me to get my teaching certificate after I had served my country over 4 deployments overseas, 2 permanent overseas assignments. But let's talk education. Education is everything. One of my students who won the Most Improved Student Award that I set up at Hayes Lodgepole High School had never thought of going to college. 2 years ago, he received his bachelor's in community health right here in Bozeman from Montana State University. Okay? So, but how do we get this to be affordable? There is so much student debt out there, and I do believe we need to think in terms of thirds. A third of that student debt should probably be relieved. I believe a third should be taken on by the student, and I believe a third should be relieved vis-a-vis national service. Not just military service, but all sorts of different service programs, and national service is going to be a critical piece of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
When 44 million students accumulate $1.5 trillion in debt, we have a crisis. I support, Senator Warren's plan, where she will be able to allocate $50,000 per student. Look, we help the world. We have the resources to help our students. When I was growing up in Africa, my father said, I can't give you property or wealth, but I'll give you a sound education where you would make it on your own. I said the same thing to my kids, not realizing America, Africa, 2 different. So I'm stuck with hundreds of thousands of student loan bills right now. So I know what it is when we're talking about high cost of tuition. Let's do something. We have the will. We can do it. Senator Warren got a plan to help. If we can, $1.5 trillion debt. Will the students ever start to be able to make it on their own? Let's take that $50,000 and start helping our students, including myself, because I got a mountain load of debt.
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Thank you for that question. I was raised by my mother and stepfather. Neither of them graduated high school. So when we talk about student debt forgiveness, I ended up going and getting a lot of education, worked up to multiple jobs at a time to get my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Worked, one of my jobs to pay that tuition was as a union laborer. So I like to say, if anyone needs help pouring concrete, give me a call. But I worked really hard. And all the way through to pay for my degrees, and yet I still have $80,000 in debt. And we have so many young people out there who cannot invest in a home and really start their lives because of the student debt that they have. Here in Montana, I'm very focused on public health care and access to high-quality, affordable health care across the state. One of the main areas that we are seeing huge struggle across the state right now is recruiting and retaining providers. Why? Because of the debt. We can't, there are 52 of our 56 counties in Montana have critical primary care shortages, and they cannot find and recruit providers because of the cost of living, because of the cost of the student loan debt. So I'm very much in favor of partial student loan debt, of national service, and of making sure that we have debt forgiveness for critical careers and professions around the country and state.
Thank you, Cora. Mike?
When we talk about the young millennials who are getting through college with crippling debt, that's me. I have gone through the public education system, and when I got to college, I watched the tuition double in the time I was there. It doubled. And I did not get anything else. The education didn't change. The teachers didn't change. We got a new gym. That was cool. But this is the problem. This is an issue that I care a lot about as an educator. I've tutored my entire life, basically. I've taught multiple times in college courses. I've seen our young kids. I taught in the wilderness therapy. I've seen our young kids try to go through these issues. And I watched my father as he was young, when he had 8 children and when he graduated from college so that he could. I have 18 siblings. Didn't know if I told you guys that. Sorry, I usually. And I watched him go through the education system just to struggle, just to keep trying. And I'm in that same boat too. And this is why I support laws that, rather than encourage poverty, they discourage poverty. And that's why I support universal basic income through my Federal Teacher Student Act, because in my view, teachers and students are the same thing, and we need to expand that to include trade schools and apprenticeships and job corps and all of those different types of alternative education, so that we are no longer just aiming for one type of standardized test in our intelligence in our children.
Thank you, Mike. All right, we're going to start again with you, John. This question is related to child care. According to the Montana Budget and Policy Center, in 2016, the average cost for full-time care of an infant was $750 per month and $650 per month for a 4-year-old. Bozeman child care costs easily exceed these averages now, since these were in 2016. In the Senate, how can you help working parents with this significant expense?
Well, this hits pretty close to home, Mike. As I said, our young son may be discharged from the hospital soon, made a completely miraculous recovery, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And we're looking at, what will my wife do who works? And what will I do who has decided to run for the United States Senate? And it's really fundamental, and the costs are so high. But I think where Democrats go wrong is we fail to look at the return on investment of the idea of universal child care. Because this is something that's just not a nice to have or a moral thing. It's all of that, but it is also pro-business. It is for the most robust economy possible, because if we are disenfranchising folks who would otherwise be amazingly productive contributors to our economy because they can't afford decent child care, then that holds back our entire nation. We need to really have a big rethink. Thanks.
Thank you. Wilmont?
That's why I support $15 minimum wage. That's part of the reason. If our families cannot feed themselves on $7, do the math. $7 cannot pay rent and go to and take care of our kids. I've seen this firsthand in the work I do. There's no way we can continue to live the way they're living. $7 can't do it, $8 can't do it. $15 may do it. But we also look at, and so when John talked about universal child care, I support that, because that's what we need. We need that subsidy. Look, if we're helping others, why aren't we using our resources to help ourselves? Instead, we're allowing our people to leave and go and stay on the streets because they can't afford the rent on $7. With two household parents working, it's $36,000 a year. $36,000 a year, and you take $36,000 a year and you put that into rent, that's $20,000 a year in rent. How are they going to feed themselves or take care of their kids? It's not possible.
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Thank you. I want to back up just a little bit and talk not only about child care. We have actually solutions for that. We have child care tax credits. We have initiatives that have been proposed for universal child care in pre-K. It's something that I would absolutely support. But let's back up even a little more and talk about parental leave. One of the things that we talked about when I was at the State Department, one of the things we pushed really hard for in the Obama administration, we talked about obviously about women's progress and women's economic empowerment here in this country. And we referred to childcare as the black hole of the women's movement. Women in this country, there are huge rates of women dropping out of the workforce to take care of their children. So it's not only hard on families, it's hard on the economy. There is so much evidence showing that parental leave for men or women, but parental leave, paid parental leave, and there are some great proposals that are already out there that we could absolutely pass if we flip the Senate, as well as the child care tax credit and coverage for universal child care in pre-K. It's critical for the growth of our nation.
Thank you, Cora. Mike?
I love everything that's being said up here on the stage today. All of these ideas will do a lot to help our low end of the economy. I'm a teacher, I'm a mathematician, and I like to use graphs and charts, so standing up here in front of a mic is really difficult for me to show and explain all of these ideas to you. I would rather have a whiteboard and you interacting with me so that I can get your opinions and I can tell how you're understanding these things. So I guess the way that I would answer this is universal basic income is the biggest thing that we can do to start helping all of these people. And if we do it the way that I'm suggesting, we do it through the Federal Teacher-Student Act, where we create a free university, not just a free university, but a university that pays our students to go there, then if our citizens have that opportunity, we are encouraging them to educate themselves rather than discouraging them to. And at the same time, I agree with the rest of these things. We need to start implementing all of these issues, but if we can give those single mothers and single fathers, and if we can go through and fix the court systems, if we talk about just how bad the court systems are as a divorced father and as a formerly homeless child, these things would not help in those situations. So that's why in my introduction I said we need bold action and comprehensive change. We cannot just attack this from one angle. We need to fix the bottom end of the economy so that we discourage poverty, so that we stop letting people fall through the cracks.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
Cora stole my thunder. I expect that's going to happen a lot. Dr. Newman, I'll say this. My child care when I was growing up was my grandparents or the Schrader YMCA outside of Brown Deer, Wisconsin. I am 100% in support of universal child care, universal pre-K, and a paid family leave act. The federal government just passed 12 weeks of paid family leave for every federal employee. Why can't we do that nationwide for everybody? There are solutions to this. I know plenty of single moms in this valley that don't know what to do with their kids when they go to work. It's just another way that young people in this society are crippled between insurance, childcare, not making enough in wages, living on tips. Anybody in this room live on tips? That's a minute.
Thank you, Josh. All right, our next question, we'll start with Wilmont. It has to do with energy. Investments in infrastructure and new energy sources are often presented as options for responding to the impacts of the climate crisis. What policy solutions do you favor to address the climate crisis, and why?
On Monday, Helena will be moving towards 100% renewable energy resources. In 2006, our Pentagon announced that our number one threat to national security was climate change. We need to address that. And if we're sitting here talking about everything else, climate change is not only a security threat, it's economic threat, it's social threat, environmental threat, and we need to start addressing that ASAP. What I would do, the first thing we need to do is get back into the Paris Accord. We need to start relying on our allies. We need to get back with our allies. And let's work on this together. America can't do it alone. We need our allies to assist. And that's what I'll do on my first day, get back into the Paris Climate Accord.
Thank you. Cora?
Our two biggest industries here in Montana are outdoor recreation, which really relies heavily on our public lands, and agriculture. Both of those industries that are so critical to driving our economy here in Montana are under serious threat because of climate change. At the same time, we have wind like many other states don't have. We have enough wind to provide energy to Montana 70 times over. We have enough wind here to provide 29% of the country's energy needs. Yet we have roadblocks that many of us have been following here in the state, but there are huge federal incentives for investing in renewable energy. That would be a high priority for me, not only for Montana, but for the country. Also, on the public lands front, we need to keep our resources in the ground for the most part. There are places where we have some great move towards renewable energy and transitional energy, but we have, since this current president, Trump, took office, we have had a huge spike in oil and gas lease across huge swaths of our public land across this country. We would need to reel that in immediately, create major incentives for investments in renewable energy, and think really seriously about what we're investing in our agricultural sector, including soil health, which plays a critical role in preventing climate change.
Thank you, Cora. Mike?
The way I've developed my platform, I'm really OCD, so I like to list things out. I've made it into a textbook format, and I'm working on getting all the details down, but it goes like this. First, we need to fix our economy. We need to invert our social safety net so that we are discouraging poverty instead of encouraging it. That's chapter 0. And then chapter 2, which comes next, is we need to end corruption. We need to get rid of the corrupting influence of money in our education systems. Then we have chapter 3, which is we need to expand our healthcare system to be universal and then to include mental health, because that's a crisis that we need to worry about. And one thing, I am a personal survivor of a lot of mental health issues. I have bipolar disorder. I have OCPD. I was abused as a child, which gives me trauma and CPTSD. I know these things, and one of the approaches I've taken to fix this, to help myself heal, is focusing on what I put into my body. What we eat is directly affecting our physical health and our mental health, and that is directly from our agriculture processes, how we just pump salt into our soil, and we don't care about any of that process. We need to get back to the land, and we need to start worrying about what the earth needs, and we need to ask the indigenous population and who have been here the whole time what solutions they have, because they know how to fix this.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
Okay. So, I am for a federal ban on all new mines nationwide. Okay, so we'll start there. I'm separating the two industries, mining and oil and gas. I'm also for an increase. The current royalty on federal oil and gas leases minimum onshore is 12.5%. I want to increase that to 18.75% and take that additional 6.25%. I look like Bernie Sanders up here. Take that additional 6.25% and reinvest it in renewable energy solutions in the communities where the oil and gas leases are. There's money on the table. The offshore royalty rate is 18.75%. We can raise the onshore federal oil and gas royalty rate, pay for renewable resources, and start transitioning to a more renewable energy sourced country. Thank you.
Thanks,
Very
Josh.
nerve-wracking up here. I don't know if you guys know that.
John?
As the only expert in energy out of this entire group, and the only person with agricultural experience, having owned a 1,500-acre cattle ranch in north central water-scarce Montana, this issue of climate change is one of the biggest things impacting not just the United States, but the entire planet. First of all, the Paris Climate Accords, increasing fuel efficiency for transportation, all of this is just the very, very minimum that we need to do. We really need to think in terms of 4 critical areas, and not just myopically in terms of the United States. We need to get China and India together at the table, and we need to make sure that we have a president who does not believe that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. We need to get everybody globally, and the COP UN system is good but inadequate. We need to think in terms of radically shifting to clean power generation, fuel, transportation, energy storage, which in Martinsdale and Montana is a $1 billion project that's going to hire so many folks and is critical to scaling up intermittent solar, wind, and renewable energies. And the other thing is we need to get networked. We need to have smart grids. We need to make sure that people can recharge their cars or refuel their cars with zero-emission hydrogen-based fuel cells. The sky is the limit, and from job creation potential, it's absolutely within Montana's wheelhouse.
Thank
right
you,
now,
John.
the current policy is anti-jobs. Thank you.
All right, our next category, Cora, you'll get to start on this. It has to do with foreign policy. In your opinion, what is the most important foreign policy issue facing our country, and how would you address it?
I actually think climate change is one of the biggest foreign policy issues. One of the things that motivate, and getting back into the Paris, we actually have a resolution on Mitch McConnell's desk, H.R. 9, which would make it illegal for any president to pull out of a court such as that. We need to make it happen. One of the biggest reasons I got into this race was a dining room conversation, dinner conversation I was having with my children at one point. My daughter, who was 14 at the time, looked at me and said, "Why are you so concerned with where we're going to college and what kind of careers we're going to have when the world is going to be on fire in 12 years?" It was such a gut punch. I knew at that moment, this is one of the things that motivated me to run, to make sure that we are creating a world that our children can not just survive in, but that can thrive in. So I would take climate change incredibly seriously as one of the first things out of the gate. It's one of the places that we have created the most bad will around the world under this administration, and so that would be number one.
Thank you. Mike?
We have a lot of issues to deal with in foreign policy, but I think that the most important one is getting better leadership and restoring faith in our government, because right now, if we can't even trust our Congress and our Senate to do the right thing, then how can we expect other nations to think the same about us? I recently took a work trip over to Europe, and I went around, and everywhere I went, I tried to talk about politics, and it was really interesting. Every time I introduced myself as being from America, I got this reaction. "Oh, I don't want to talk to you." But every time I said I was from Montana, they said, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I know some people from Montana." Or, "Oh, I've heard really good things about there." And that's because the people here, the people in Montana, the reason I moved here, I'm not native to Montana. I'm not native to anywhere, I don't think. I've traveled a lot since I was, homeless at 16, and I've been a lot of places, and it's hard for me to sit down. But at the end of the day, I want to be here with these people who know how to take care of the land, who care about agriculture issues, who know where we need to go in the future, and we need to get rid of Steve Daines.
Thank you, Mike. I think that's a sentiment we all share in this building. Josh?
According to the Constitution, the power to declare war lies with the Congress. In my opinion, the most pressing foreign policy issue is the authorization of use of military force of 2002, which almost single-handedly let Donald Trump take us to war with Iran on January 2nd. In my opinion, that's our primary issue. We need a new authorization of use of military force, so we're not sending guys like Mike and John and Wilmont overseas. We need to bring our troops home. We need to focus on this country. Whoa, you know what I almost said? The authorization of use of military force is our most pressing issue, because if we end up in another war in another country, another indefinite war, then we can't make this country any better.
Thank you, Josh. John?
As one who's been privileged to be entrusted with a top-secret SCI clearance, who's worked very closely with the CIA, with ONI, DIA, Special Operations Command, I was the liaison between the SEALs and the Nuclear Submarine Force, I have some very differentiated viewpoints on foreign policy. And Josh, I think you are absolutely right. What has happened in the last 20 years, 2 of our longest wars ever, wars of choice, resulting in $6 trillion, as well as countless lives lost on both sides, and for what end? Very little. But I would also like to mention that there right now is a strain of authoritarianism. The United States' greatest allies used to be partners in democracy and free trade. Now we see this shift of authoritarianism. What was Daines doing hanging out with Putin when he knew that Russia was meddling in our elections? But that's just the beginning of it. What's going on in Turkey, in northern Syria with our Kurds, abandoning our Kurds? What's going on in places like North Korea, where we say the problem solved, yet Taepyeong-type missiles are right now pointed at the United States, and our spatial border security has never been weaker. But we focus so much time on the southern border. Weak. Daines is weak on foreign policy, he's weak on national security, and he fears somebody who isn't. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wilmont.
Yes, sir. Foreign policy. As the only trained foreign policy officer here, I'll tell you our greatest threat is our president. Look, the United States, we've lost our competitive edge. I say that to say we're not trusted anymore as the leader of foreign policy. When we have Jared Kushner going to bring peace to the Middle East, we're joking. We're not serious. We're joking. The last time I think we ever had a real serious peace negotiation was the Camp David Accord. We have lost our competitive edge by alienating our allies, the people that should be helping us formulate our agenda. We've alienated them. So, to wrap this up, I'll say our greatest foreign policy threat, sadly, is our president.
Thank you, Wilmont. All right, our next question, and we're going to start with Mike, is related to Social Security. Despite being a successful safety net program, the future of Social Security benefits is uncertain and under constant threat. How do you view the future of Social Security, and what policies do you support to strengthen and defend the program?
Again, I want to mention that I'm one of those millennials who's never going to see Social Security. The program has been successful, but there are some math issues with it. When the population shifts and we have the baby boomers and all these issues, the money isn't in the right place at the right time. This is why I support universal basic income and universal health care. If we have universal health care and everybody has health care and everybody has free education and everybody has a basic income, then what are we worried about? We need to treat all people the same because we are all created equal. And we need to go back to that, and we need to believe that in ourselves again, and we need to stop arguing and fighting about everything and just get down and start working on solutions.
Thank you, Mike. Josh?
You know, it's Social Security is such a weird idea to me because I'm kind of with Mike too. I don't know that I'm ever going to see it, but that doesn't mean that we should attack it. If you've paid in your entire life, you should get your checks every month. Absolute. I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. John?
So I couldn't disagree with you more. Social Security will be around. We're going to make sure that it's around, okay? So one of the most unpatriotic acts of American history was in 2017 when Senator Daines voted for a tax bill that blew a multi-trillion-dollar hole through the nation's pocketbook, has resulted in greater than $1 trillion annual deficits, which will be, moving forward, adding additional to our nation's debt. But the game here is to give the ultra wealthy and powerful multinational corporations huge tax breaks that are frankly unjustified. Bringing up the national debt and then saying what we need to attack are entitlements such as Social Security, Medicare. We've seen the latest budget from the Trump administration with Dane's implicit endorsement. That is shameful. It's unpatriotic. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that our seniors are taken care of. That includes not only Social Security and Medicare, but it also includes rethinking the way we engage seniors in the community. I've actually worked with a startup nonprofit focused on reducing senior citizen loneliness and depression. That type of idea can be scaled in all sorts of different communities. Social Security will be around. We just need to make sure that it's properly funded and the resources are there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wilmont?
Fair is fair. When we allow people that make $1 million and people that make $137,000 pay the same amount into Social Security, that's wrong. The wealthy should pay the fair share into Social Security, and they're not doing that. Social Security is not an entitlement. We paid into it. It will be here for us. But we have to put it where it belongs, and that is let the ultra-wealthy pay the fair share. It is it's unbelievable that we even have a system of this nature where someone making $137,000 and someone making $1 million paying the same amount. How can we account for that?
Thank you, Wilmont. Cora?
Yeah, I agree with you, Wilmont. It's not an entitlement. This is something that we have earned. Senator Daines has taken aim at twice now between the Republican tax bill and his agreed with John the implicit support of the recent budget proposal. Huge tax cuts. The majority of the tax cuts that were passed, 83% of the benefit went to the top 1% of the ultra wealthy. I want to take a moment here, I don't know if this is going to come up, to bring up money in politics. I personally have taken the no corporate PAC pledge. When I worked at the State Department, I worked in the Economic Bureau, and I watched companies draft legislation and hand it to legislators. The ultra-wealthy are not paying their fair share because we have a tax code that is not built for the working average American, and those benefits are suffering because of it. I'm deeply committed to protecting Medicare and Social Security, making sure that those benefits are available for generations to come, making sure that we have, it's not an entitlement, it's something that we've earned, and it's care that we need to, and benefits that we need to protect for all of our communities.
Thank you, Cora. Well, folks, I hate to say it, but we've come to the end of the questions. We've run out of time, because we need a little bit of time for you to give closing statements. Each of you will get 2 minutes to give a closing statement. We started at that end with questions. Why don't we start at this end with our closing statements? Josh, I knew you'd be excited about this.
Just stoked to be here.
We're glad to have you here too, Josh.
You know, I announced my candidacy on Tuesday, and the headline in the Chronicle was another Bozeman man in Senate race. I got to tell you, I've been called a lot worse. You know, I moved to Bozeman 11 years ago, and I'm not a native Montanan, but when I found this place, I fell in love, and I've done literally everything I can to live here. I've left here to live here. I've worked in places many of you would not want to go to live here. You know, nobody really knows who I am, and I'm pretty okay with that. You know, I'm a fishing guide. I don't think I'm an idiot, but I'm not a genius. I know I'm not the smartest person on this stage, and I will never pretend to be. You know, but I feel like I have a message that resonates. So I'm here to announce that starting Sunday, I'm getting in the truck, and I'm going to all 56 counties in Montana. And I'm going to speak to as many of the 1.1 million residents of this state as humanly possible. That's how I'm going to win this primary. It's not with money. It's not with outside influence. It's not with big media buys and fancy people in suit jackets. It's with gas and coffee and cheap motel rooms. So, if you've heard what I've said tonight, and yeah, admittedly, I've had a few fumbles. I'll be the first to admit that. I hope you visit Seconder for Senate. You can spell that just about any way you want and still get there. SecondJurorForSenate.com, and consider making a donation to my campaign. Together, we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Michael?
I wish I could just talk to you all about my platform with the chalkboard and you guys interacting with me, because that's how we do this. We do this together, and we don't fix our country by continuing to fight among ourselves. My message is for each and every person here. It's for everybody watching this. It's for every single Bozemanite. It's for every Montanan. And it's for every American and everybody across the world. Because we need right now democracy more than anything else. And right now democracy is at stake by pushing further and further towards authoritarianism. And the only way we do that is by fighting corruption, is by fixing our tax code and our economy. It's by fixing our healthcare system and fixing our mental health crises, and so that we can finally get to what should be the most important issue, an issue we've known about since the 70s, and we have not done very much at all as a country, fix the environment. Because we are a parasite on this earth, and we are destroying it because we do not understand the consequences of our actions. We can ask the question of the butterfly effect, but really what it should be is, if we kill all the butterflies, what happens? Right now, the bee population is dropping, the insect population is dropping, the whales and the fish and the birds, we've lost half our birds since the 70s. And none of this is okay. And so what we need to do is change the political narrative and stop fighting and come together as a people, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, but libertarians as well. Men, women, transgender people, gay, bi, doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter your background. I was a homeless child at 16, and at 32, I'm standing up and running for Senate. If I can do this, you can, and we can. Join me at MikeKnowles2020.com.
Thank you, Mike. Cora?
Thank you again to everybody for coming tonight. I'm running for U.S. Senate because Montana deserves an independent senator fighting for Montana families in the U.S. Senate. Right now, we have a senator who is, if you look at his record, more beholden to corporate special interests than he is to Montana families. I shared earlier that my father died in a lumber mill accident when I was a baby. And if we had been closer to good care, he may have survived. I was raised here in Bozeman by a homemaker and a union carpenter with values that I think we all share. Hard work, caring for one another, and to be stewards of this the incredible natural resources that are all around us. I was very motivated by the loss of my father to go out and study and work in public health, and I have spent my life and career dedicated to making sure that rural and Native communities across the world and across the West and here in Montana have access to the health care that they need. As I travel the state, I hear stories of people who are driving up to 5 hours to get care. We have critical health shortages across the state. We have threats of Medicare and Social Security being lost or threatened. And yet we have a senator sitting in Washington threatening, with some of the best health care in the country, by the way. He's enjoying great health care. Threatening to rip that health care away from 1 in 10 Montanans, to cripple our rural health centers, and to make life for Montanans so much harder. He's not representing us. He's not fighting for our children's future. When I make it to the Senate, I have the energy, the infrastructure, and the experience to get there. We're building a wonderful movement. We've got thousands of supporters so far. And what I'm hearing from Montanans is that they are ready for someone who's actually going to bring them to the table, not corporate special interest. I look forward to serving you in the U.S. Senate. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Cora. Wilmont?
Thanks for having me here this evening. It's a pleasure, and I want to thank the other candidates. I'm running for the U.S. Senate because each state deserves 2 senators. Montana has been shortchanged. Montana has 1 senator. The other senator decided to join the executive branch. Imagine having 2 senators that will fight for affordable care for Montanans. Imagine 2 senators fighting for public lands. Imagine 2 senators fighting for you and low education costs. Most importantly, imagine fighting for that little native girl that said, "What does it feel like to be safe?" That's why I'm in this race, to raise our quality of life, because being shortchanged is the wrong thing. And we've been doing that since Senator Daines got in office. He immediately decided to join the gravy train. But listen, I am the one to take us to the next level. Join my campaign. Go to my website, wilmotcollins.com. I will be ready on day 1 to make things happen for this great state we enjoy so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilmont. John?
Well, again, I would just like to thank everybody for being here. Again, Gallatin County Democrats, you, Mike, and my fellow U.S. Senate candidates. It's been a pleasure. I think these debates are important, right? You folks may look at 5 Democratic U.S. Senate candidates up here. I'll tell you what the Republican Party and what Senator Daines is seeing. They're seeing 2 candidates. 1 candidate, John Muse, that can beat Senator Daines come November 3rd, 2020, and also help all of the Democrats up and down the ballot, including for governor and for U.S. House of Representatives, where we have an authentic Montana woman about to make history, and 4 candidates who will give Senator Daines a free pass during the general election and will not compliment our fellow Democrats. So while I am all for this, and we need to get into those specifics, and this is not the time or place, but beating Senator Daines is an existential obligation. The stakes are too high for our country, for our state, for my family, for yours. It is not enough to see ad hoc Mitch McConnell or others get beaten. Senator Daines and his like need to get beaten. I am the candidate to do that. Why? How is that so? The only candidate with agricultural experience in an agriculture state. The only candidate who has served his country in a combat zone where Montana leads the nation second only to Alaska in military service. The only candidate to live in rural Montana where 50% of the general electorate voters reside. The only candidate to be a public school teacher and be able to champion education, and on and on and on. This is an opportunity for Montana Democrats to get this right, and let's beat Senator Daines. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before we exit the stage, I'd like the 5 of you to just step out in front of your microphones, please. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause for these courageous candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 30-minute break so we can set up for the gubernatorial debate. Candidates, you might as well go to the other room and visit with constituents.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Leave it on your way out. Thank you for your generosity. But you're willing, what's a check? He says, all right, we'll take your Venmo or your cryptocurrency, whatever you've got, Kelly. Bitcoin. The resources that you all invest in this central committee allow us to invest in our local candidates. What does $900 after primary day for all of our legislative candidates means? It means you're buying walk cards, you're updating, you're advertising on social media, and at the end of the day, you're doing mailers and you're talking to voters. That's how we win from the ground up, and your investments tonight can help us get a jump start in that process so that this central committee can support all the good people who are standing on this stage today who are putting their necks out there. So please dig deep and give till it hurts, and know that we will be endlessly grateful for your contributions and your generosity. So with that, and we all have to dig deep if we're going to win in this next year, right? And Gallatin County is key to everything statewide in Montana, and we all know that. After the gubernatorial debate, the party goes on in the ballroom, so keep drinking and eating and socializing with our candidates who have driven from all corners of Montana to be here with you tonight. And one last time, thank you for supporting Gallatin County Democrats and for being an active member of our society and our communities, and for making Montana the last best place. Mike Wheat, take it away.
So here we go again. So we have two candidates now for governor. I'm going to do the same thing here that I did with the senatorial. I'm going to introduce the candidates. They'll come out, and then we'll start our questions. Because there's only two candidates, each candidate will have a minute and a half to answer questions, and then they'll have 2-minute closing. So with that, if we're all ready, I'll start, and I'm going to introduce first Whitney Williams. Whitney is a sixth-generation Montanan and businesswoman who founded her own company working alongside Fortune 500 companies and charities to solve tough questions, just like those Montanans face every day. Now she's running for governor to bring a fresh perspective and bold ideas to Helena to solve the new set of challenges Montanans in every corner of the state are facing. As governor, Whitney will fight for Montana's working families by standing up to the out-of-state special interests and big corporations that want to make Montana their personal playground. She'll provide every child in Montana access to a free and quality education by ensuring that your hard-earned tax dollars don't go toward religious or private schools. She'll hold insurance companies and big pharma accountable for the skyrocketing costs of health care and prescription drugs. And she'll fight back against the threats the Trump administration and Greg Gianforte pose to our public lands and women's health. Whitney comes from a long line of strong women dating back to those who originally homesteaded Montana. She'll bring that same grit and toughness to the governor's office to tackle the new set of challenges facing Montana's families. Please join me in welcoming Whitney Williams. Next, Mike Cooney. Mike is one of Montana's most trusted and effective leaders, having spent his entire career fighting for Montanans. Montanans have elected Mike to statewide office 4 times, as a state legislator in the House and the Senate, as Secretary of State, and as Governor Bullock's Lieutenant Governor, because they know he can get things done by bringing people together and finding responsible solutions while never compromising on our Montana values. Mike is running for governor to tackle the biggest issues facing Montanans, fighting to make sure Montanans have good-paying jobs, bringing down prescription drug costs, and increasing access to health care, addressing climate change, and standing up to attacks on our public lands, and ensuring our kids have access to the best public education we can offer. These have been the fights of Mike's career. He has a proven record of results, knows how to get the job done, and is ready to hit the ground running as governor one day. Please join me in welcoming Mike Cooney. So before we get started, you should know I didn't write these bios. They came from the candidates themselves, and they did a nice job. And I should also tell you, I feel sort of a connection, even though I've just met Whitney tonight for the first time. I served in the Montana Senate with Mike and with Whitney's mom, Carol Williams. So, and it was a pleasure. Okay. I talked to you earlier about the timing we would have. Hopefully we can get through all these questions. We've got quite a few. We have a little more time since there's only 2 candidates. But you get a minute and a half, or 90 seconds for you, Mike, since you have a tough time with those decimal points. You have 90 seconds, and we have the timekeepers down here, and they'll flag you at like that. And then, like I told you, I'm not going to ask for a rebuttal or anything like that. So with that being understood, let's move on, okay? Our first question, and I think we'll start with you, Whitney, is related to child care costs and education. The demands of child care force parents to either pay exorbitant child care costs or not return to the workforce, both of which financially stress families. As governor, what policies would you support to help parents with young children facing this situation?
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for having us. 90 seconds is going to feel like a lifetime, I will say. So first of all, I think the single most important thing we can do in this state is make sure that we get pre-K done. I will say, because you raised my mother, I'm very proud that my mom, when she was leader of the Senate working alongside Governor Schweitzer, got full-day kindergarten done, and it was not easy, but we got it done. When folks across this state are paying somewhere between $600 and $900 per kid, we've got a friend over in Missoula at the university. He's a professor, she's a writer, they've got good jobs, they got a couple of kids, and they set up a college fund. Grandparents set up a college fund for the kids when the kids were born. And what happened? When the second kid turned 4, the college fund was gone. It's an economic issue for families all across the state. And so the top priority needs to be making sure that every little learner and their parents has a chance to be in full-day pre-K in this state.
Thank you, Whitney. Mike?
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. And I just want to say, absolutely, here's the problem. We have about 40,000 children in Montana under the age of 5 with working parents. We have the capacity in Montana for child care of about 20,000. So even finding access to quality child care in Montana is a challenge. We have to address that, as well as dealing with the cost of pre-K, or cost of child care. And I would also say that pre-K, a quality public school pre-K program, is going to really help this particular issue. And what's going to happen is, we found when we had a pre-K program, which we were just modeling throughout the state a couple years ago, we saw what it did in communities and how it allowed parents with kids to be able to go back to work, and it helped the economies of those communities. So we do need a quality pre-K program in our schools, and we need to make sure that people have access to it. That is going to be a key to making sure that we give parents the ability who need to go back to work, the opportunity to go back to work, and to be able to continue to build the economy in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All right, Whitney, our next question is related to health care coverage. The Affordable Care Act expanded Montana's access to Medicaid, protects those with pre-existing conditions, and eliminated lifetime benefit caps, among many other benefits to Montanans. The Trump administration actively seeks to eliminate the ACA through Congress and the courts. If Trump is successful, which God, we hope he isn't, how would you protect access to health care and those losing coverage in Montana?
Thanks, Mike. He's not going to be successful. We are going to protect the ACA. I think that what we know is that folks like, for those of us who have health care, we want to be able to see our own doctors. And every single family and every single person I see across the state in the last 5 months has said one thing, which is that the cost of prescription drugs is immoral, that it's skyrocketing beyond where folks can deal with it. When Schweitzer was doing those bus trips, you guys remember that? 20 years ago, when he started taking seniors up to Canada and to Mexico, vial of insulin was $20. Today it's $275. We here in Montana need to stand up for ourselves, because what we know is the federal government isn't fixing this. I hope they can, and I certainly hope that we can continue ACA, but I do believe that we need to do more in Montana to make sure that we're standing up to pharmaceutical companies for price gouging, and do everything we can to make sure that our legislature does what legislatures in Tennessee just did, which is put a price cap. 30-day supply of insulin is capped at $100, and we should do that in Montana.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, again, I think we all know what the federal government and the federal administration is trying to do, but we also know that the people of this country appreciate the good work that has happened and the fact that we have better health coverage than we've had in a long time. We need to make sure we protect Medicaid. Medicaid is an incredibly important program in the state of Montana. When you talk to Montanans, they tell you that they're worried about access to health care. They're worried about access to affordable health care, and they're very, very concerned about prescription drugs. Medicaid expansion gave about 100,000 people in Montana quality access to health care. It's kept our rural hospitals intact. There was just a report last week that said rural hospitals across this country are closing down, and they're closing down in states that haven't passed Medicaid expansion. We're smart in Montana. We need to make sure we preserve that. We also need to take care of the cost of prescriptions. Shortly after I announced my candidacy for governor, I said that we were going to work with the federal government, and this is a bipartisan plan that they've approved, to make sure that Montanans can start safely and legally importing drugs from Canada, similar to what Governor Schweitzer was proposing. They're now agreeing that we can do that. If we can do that, a $28 bottle of insulin in Canada is what that costs now. Costs people in Montana between $275 and $300. We can start helping Montanans put more cash in their pockets. If we can implement that, we can do it day one when I become governor, and that'll be a priority.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney, the next question is related to health care and women's rights. Family planning clinics such as Bozeman's Bridger Care and Montana's Planned Parenthood open economic doors to Montana women by ensuring women have the resources to plan their families on their own terms. What will you do as governor to protect Montana women's access to quality family planning health care?
Well, we're going to start by defeating Greg Gianforte. This, you guys might have seen, Gianforte signed on to a brief to the Supreme Court asking him to overturn Roe v. Wade. Montana women and men are going to stop him. I was in Billings recently at the Planned Parenthood clinic, and you go through a bulletproof door, then you get up to a bulletproof screen in front of the extraordinary people there to care for women. And they told me a story about a woman who drove 300-something miles from North Dakota, and she came in, and in her arms was a bag of quarters. She had $300 in quarters, and she put it down on the counter to pay for her abortion. And she did it because she doesn't have access in North Dakota. And I'll be damned if Montana's going to be next.
Thank you, Whitney. Mike?
This is a battle that I have fought since the day I walked into the state legislature for the very first time. And it's a battle that I've taken very seriously, and I have always been a proponent of making sure women have the right to make their own health care decisions. State government has no business, government has no business in telling women what they should do with their bodies or their medical needs. If I'm elected governor, my veto pen will be very, very busy making sure no legislation becomes law.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Whitney, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about energy and coal. Northwest Energy is seeking approval from the PSC to buy a controlling interest in a coal-fired power plant, ensuring that coal continues to be a primary energy source. At the same time, surrounding states, like Idaho and Wyoming, believe it or not, invest in more sustainable energy sources such as wind and solar. What is your plan for the state's future energy demands and supply?
Well, thanks for the question. It's centrally important. Montana's got to move with urgency into a clean energy future, and I'm sorry we haven't done more of it to date. I think we do have a real situation here, which is opportunity for jobs across the board in wind, which we have an extraordinary amount of, as we all know. And we need to do more to invest in a clean energy future, and certainly in wind and solar. And I will also say, as a lifelong Democrat and someone who comes from Butte, my family for years has mined there, we have to also work closely with our friends and families in Colstrip. And first, we ought to say thank you. They've kept the lights on for years. And then we got to help them transition into a new future. And that future is one of clean energy. I think there's a variety of things the state can and should be doing. And in my administration, we'll work very hard day one to make sure that we bring private partners and government together to do exactly what our neighbors are doing. And it's well past time that Montana does that.
Thank you. Mike?
You know, this is a great question because I have to say that about 10 years ago, my wife and I decided, just as a lark, to put solar panels on our house because we thought it was the right thing to do. And we thought that if everybody started just making a few steps along that way, we could start making some real changes. Well, we know that it's not happening fast enough. We know, though, however, the market in Montana for the kind of energy that we've been a leader in producing over the history of our state, that market is changing. And we need to transition that market. We need to transition to renewables. We have incredible capacity for wind. We have incredible capacity for solar. We have incredible capacity for geothermal. There are other technologies out there that we can actually be a leader. There's no reason we can't continue to produce great jobs by moving and transitioning our energy future into with renewables. And we need to understand that this transition is tough on some people, especially the people in Colstrip. But we need to work with them by bringing our partners in private sector and in government together to make sure that we are continuing to be a leader in energy development. We can do that in Montana, and we can do it with renewables.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, don't get too comfortable, Mike, because I'm going to switch up the order here. So you're going to go first this time, okay? And this has to do with our recreational economy and public lands. Montana's outdoor recreational economy provides approximately 71,000 jobs and generates over $7 billion of consumer spending. An integral part of our recreational economy are our vast public lands. How will you defend and grow this essential part of our state economy and at the same time protect our sacred public lands?
Well, I do think we understand how important our public lands, and you've mentioned several. You took some of my answer away about the 70,000 jobs and the $7 billion in revenue. It's also a driver of our economy, folks. You talk to businesses right here in Bozeman, and you ask them how important this is, and they say, this is one way that we are able to keep our workforce. This is the way that we can attract people to our workforce because they want what we have in Montana. They love the idea that they have the best trails, the best hunting, the best fishing right outside their back door. You darn rights that our outdoor recreation economy is important to this state. What are we going to do to protect it? We're going to make sure that those people who think that it's better off that we sell those lands, that they're not successful, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that our federal, the people who want to transfer federal lands to us, that needs to stop. We need to work closely with our federal partners to make sure that they keep and manage those lands so we have access to those. We need to make sure. Montana has been discovered, and we need to make sure as we develop this industry, we use it, we develop it in a way that is a Montana answer to the way we want it, and we're willing to share it, but we want to make sure we do not lose what we have, and we want to make sure that we pass on a better outdoor recreation economy to the future generation than what we were given. We're going to do that when I'm governor.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney?
Well, let me start again with we're going to defeat Gianforte. You folks in this room here in Gallatin County know better than most when you put up that no trespassing sign, and then went on to sue the state to say that we couldn't access a river that's rightly and truly ours. Those aren't Montana values. Those are New Jersey values. And we're not going to stand for that in Montana. We're also going to stand up to the Trump administration with this wholesale effort to sell off private lands. Right? The idea is we're going to take these public lands, we're going to give them to private developers, to wealthy out-of-staters who are just going to lock them up. They're going to continue to put up no trespassing signs. And until we all come together to be sure that we continue with the $7 billion in spending and the 70,000 jobs, the largest part of our economy is the conservation economy. And we need to be sure that we do everything we can. And that means standing up to these guys who don't share our values.
Thank you, Whitney. All right, our next question, Mike, has to do with climate change. Through executive order, Governor Bullock established the Montana Climate Solutions Council in an effort to combat the climate crisis. The Bozeman Chronicle reports that the council supports, among other items, community-based renewable energy projects, creating tax breaks for low and zero-emission vehicles, and incentives for making buildings more energy efficient. As governor, what steps would you take regarding the climate crisis?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful for the work that council has done, and a lot of those items that they've discussed are going to go out to the public, and I hope we can engage the public because this is an incredibly important topic for the future of the state. I mean, when you talk to especially young people in the state, climate is the #1 issue because they know we haven't done a particularly good job, and we're going to end up passing on. If we don't start something now, we're going to pass a problem on to them. They don't deserve that. So I'm very happy with that, and I think we need to continue the efforts. We need to be looking at those recommendations. We need to give feedback, and I think there's some really good recommendations out there. I also will say something I think the state can do, and I'm very excited about, is I think the state of Montana, which we've already done, has agreed to say that we're willing to work towards the Paris Accord agreements and the goals that we set for Montana, and we're working with other states to do that. We need to continue that effort. We know that if the other side is successful at winning this particular office, we know where this issue is going to be. We need to make sure that we don't let them do it. Climate change has to be very focused in this state. It's the right thing to do for the future of this country.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney?
Yeah, so I'll say that I believe fundamentally this issue about moving with urgency into a clean energy future, making sure that we also have good paying jobs for folks to do that is going to help a great deal. I agree that we need to get our state involved with the Paris Accords, particularly if we don't defeat this president. Montana is going to have to stick up for itself. And I think that that's the direction that we should move in. And ultimately, there are a lot of good jobs in having a clean climate and a clean economy. And I think we should do all of the things that a state can do, including looking at our own business. I'm a businesswoman. I manage my business by looking at efficiencies everywhere I can. This state owns a lot of buildings. This state owns a lot of cars. This state has a big budget, and we should be looking everywhere we can to see whether or not we can conserve more energy ourselves and set some goals that are realistic for us to achieve them in a tight time frame.
Thank you, Whitney. All right, Mike, our next question is related to the infrastructure economy. We hear a lot about the infrastructure needs across the state. Roads and highways are in disrepair. Numerous bridges are structurally unsound. Municipal water and sewer systems, public schools, and other public buildings and facilities need repairs, replacement, and upgrading. Responding to these needs will provide hundreds of good-paying jobs and improve access to Montana's public resources. What will your policy be for responding to our infrastructure needs?
Well, I mean, this has been a battle that we've fought over about the last 10 years where Montana legislature has failed to pass a meaningful infrastructure bill. This year we broke that logjam and we actually passed an infrastructure bill and we were able to get money out into communities. They use this money to improve their water and sewer, their bridges and their roadways. This is very important. We cannot expect our communities to grow economically if they cannot provide the basic services to the people in their communities and the surrounding areas. It's very important. As you said, it does create good-paying jobs as well. So I will just say this. We've broken the logjam in this last session. I feel good. We will continue to have a very strong and aggressive infrastructure program in every legislature as I'm governor, and we will continue to fight for it and make sure that we're doing everything we can to drive money into communities and to fund projects for the state of Montana that are important. These are investments. This is not funding just going out doing nothing. This is investing in our community. It's investing in our state. That means we're investing in our people. We'll have a very strong infrastructure program.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney?
Well, I think if we're going to attract the kind of jobs that we're going to need to attract in the future, we certainly need to have better infrastructure than we have. You know, Montana just got a C grade. Montana's an A+ state. Shouldn't be getting a C grade for our infrastructure. I think we're going to have new challenges ahead of us, and we need new ideas to solve some of these problems. We can also involve the private sector in ways that I think maybe we have not. And then, of course, we need to rely on our federal partners. Many of the roads we have in this state are paved with that cash. So we need to have a representative willing to stand up in Washington and say, this is what we need, and also bring unlikely allies like some of our private sector folks together to look at what might we do together. But centrally, we've got to make sure that we have an extraordinary infrastructure in this state. It's the future of this state, and certainly we know that when we're talking about attracting some of the types of jobs that we want to attract and businesses we want to attract, like you all have here in Bozeman, we've got to have the infrastructure to do it. 4.5 million people drive on the roads, tourists drive on the roads here in Bozeman. We've got to find ways to make sure that we continue to have the best possible infrastructure, and frankly, that some of these out-of-staters pay their fair share on it.
Thank you, Whitney. All right, the next question, and again, we'll start with you, Mike. This has to do with taxes. Across our great state, homeowners feel the burden of rising property taxes to fund schools, law enforcement, and fire protection, as well as other critical community needs. In growing communities like Bozeman, the Montana legislature refuses to allow voters the choice of a local option sales tax to help alleviate the burden. What will be your policy regarding tax relief, fairness, and reform?
Well, that's a big question for 90 seconds, I got to tell you. But I will say that it is a huge issue. You know, when you talk to people in Montana about taxes and you listen to them, they basically say they want fairness, they want understandability, and they want predictability. We don't pass that test. How can we say we're fair when a woman making a minimum wage salary pays the same tax rate as somebody making $500,000? That is wrong. That is not fair. You specifically mentioned property taxes. Property taxes are tied to the market. We know in other areas, in a lot of areas, that market is growing. And then communities are making investments in their communities. They're building libraries, they're building infrastructure, and they're passing levies. That's going to affect that. So I think we need to look at things. We can look at the homeowner, the homeowner tax credit that we have in Montana. It hasn't been dealt with in a long time. We can look at raising that. We can take a look at whether or not the stipulations in that can be adjusted to include more people. There are things we can do, and state government can try to find other ways to look at those choke points that are hurting communities and see where the state and federal government can step in and help alleviate some of the problems that these communities are facing with property taxes.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney?
Yeah, so let's talk about homeownership. There's a crisis. Folks can't afford, certainly you all here in Bozeman, I live in Missoula. People can't afford houses. Renters are having a tough time. And it's not just us. It's small towns and rural communities as well. We have an affordable housing crisis across the state. And we don't have, in Montana, a state tax credit to help with that. That's one of the tangible things that we absolutely could be doing. And the other thing, back to our wealthy out-of-state friends who come here and use our infrastructure, they're buying up big tracts of land, they're locking it off, and they are not paying their fair share. And it is well past time. We say to them, you are welcome in Montana, but you're going to pay for the roads that you're driving on, you're going to pay for the schools that you're not sending your kids to, and you're going to pay for the main streets you're not shopping at. And there are a variety of ways in which we can increase revenue to do just that.
Thank you, Whitney. Okay, so don't get too comfortable, Whitney. We're switching up again here. This one is going to be about education funding. In recent years, the Montana legislature has tried, and in some cases succeeded, in siphoning funds away from our public schools and into private schools. At the same time, rural Montana schools struggle to attract and retain qualified teachers, such as those educated here at Montana State and at other Montana universities. As governor, what will be your school funding policy, and how will you incentivize Montana teachers to educate the children in our smaller communities?
Thank you, Mike. That's a great question. A couple of things. You know, schools in our rural communities are closing, or they're going from 5 days a week to 4. We have teacher shortage, and we aren't paying teachers enough. We aren't incentivizing enough kids. We aren't incentivizing enough kids to stay in those communities or go to those communities. So I think there's a variety of loan forgiveness programs that we need to look at. I think ultimately, I'm a product of public schools. I started at Smith School in Helena and graduated from the other school, University of Montana in Missoula.
So did I.
Yeah. And I think we've got to make sure, I'm really proud that we've been able to have this tuition cap of the four-year schools, but I also think we need to do a lot more to make sure that we have opportunities and pathways for good-paying jobs through local community colleges and training programs and apprentice programs. You know, it's not the future for every single kid to go to a four-year school. And for kids who want to go to apprenticeship programs or two-year schools, we should celebrate that, and we should help those kids do a lot more of it. We've got great education in this state, and we can make it even better.
Thank you, Whitney. Mike?
Well, two things. First of all, I'm a product of the public school system here in Montana is my wife and our 3 children. I'm a very proud father of a school teacher in Helena in the public school system. So I have a great appreciation for what teachers do in this state, and we need to make sure that we continue to make record investment in our public education system. We've found states around the country, about most of them, there's only about 10 who have continued to continually support at a higher level education. Montana is one of them, and we need to make sure that we keep that track record going. We need to make sure that that we keep our college tuitions affordable. If we're not doing that, we're cheating our future workforce in this state. We also need to make sure that we're giving opportunities for apprenticeship programs, dual enrollment for our high school kids who can get college credits. That's going to save them money going into college. We need to make sure that work-based learning is available throughout this state. There are so many ways that we can control, or that we can help our students throughout this state. Again, one of the biggest reasons businesses say that, one of the biggest problems they say they're having is getting a workforce to do the jobs they need. Our education system is the answer to this. We need to open it up and give all those possibilities so we can make sure we have a workforce second to none, and we can compete. Our kids can compete anywhere in the world.
Thank you, Mike. All right, Whitney, this next question has to do with, it's kind of a mixed bag here of taxes, criminal justice, and marijuana.
Put them all together.
In November, Montana voters may be asked by initiative whether to legalize recreational marijuana. If Montana voters approve the legalization of recreational marijuana, where should the tax revenue from those marijuana sales be invested? And would you support automatic expungement of possession of marijuana convictions from criminal records?
Well, we obviously need to take a very serious look at this. 2 things. To answer the latter part of the question first, a lot of folks are in jail for nonviolent offenses that shouldn't be in jail. And in terms of where that revenue should go, I think we need to really take a close look at some of our neighbors, Washington, Colorado, others who've done this, and really say, where do we think that revenue can go? And let's make sure that we have addiction and treatment and mental health fully funded as well.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, I've had a chance to read at least one of the initiatives that's currently out there, and in that particular proposal, it does outline where they believe the revenues should ultimately go. And I tend to agree with the direction that is taking. I do think we need to make sure that the revenue picture is very clear and people understand, and I think they're looking at about a 20% tax. Some may argue that we could even tax it a little bit higher, but the initiative is, I think, currently at 20%. I absolutely agree with expungement. I think that is absolutely something that is important. We are putting a lot of people in prison, and it costs us a lot of money to keep them there. There's no reason they shouldn't be there. We also need to make sure we are dealing with addiction. We're dealing with mental health. We're dealing with with the services that people need. You know, it's amazing. It's an amazing thing with Medicaid expansion. Now those people have, for the first time, access to mental health and drug addiction. People are taking advantage of that. We know people are out there. They want to help themselves. We need to make sure we're continuing to fund those kinds of services so that we can make sure our people in Montana are able to take care of those problems. So I think that's the way we need to go with this initiative.
Thank you. Whitney, the next question is related to the healthcare economy. The healthcare industry is one of the fastest growing sectors of the Montana economy and provides some of the highest paying jobs. Elimination of the ACA would surely send shockwaves through this economy. Again, assuming this were to happen, which God forbid it does, how would you protect and defend this important sector of our Montana economy?
So again, Mike, it's a good question, but it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to happen. Look at a Friday night in Bozeman, and we've got a packed house with folks who want to come get involved because they don't want it to happen either. What I will say is rural communities, I think the health sector is gigantically important across the state, but rural communities really need these emergency healthcare facilities. We need to make sure that we continue to do everything we can to keep those rural hospitals open. Medicaid expansion will certainly help with that. I think we need to make sure that we start the negotiations on that process so that we don't have a sunset in 2025. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that people don't have to travel hundreds of miles to have a baby or get cancer care. We've got a big, beautiful state, but we should have plenty of access for folks to be able to get to the health care that they need.
Thank you. Mike?
You know, I've been involved in the healthcare issue for quite a long time, and probably when I first came face-to-face with some of the issues was when I was the executive director of Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies right here in Montana. And at that time, we had passed the CHIP program, and then we had money in that program, but we didn't have anybody going out there advocating and teaching people how to get their families signed up, and that's what we ended up doing. And I saw what that program did for the people in Montana. The same thing can be said for Medicaid expansion. We need to make sure that we keep Medicaid expansion in place, we protect it. We know just in the last couple weeks that the administration in Washington, D.C. has come out and said that they wanted to perhaps change the way that Medicaid was handled. We know that that is not going to help us in Montana. We know that will cut services to people in Montana. We know that is not what Montanans need in order to continue decent health care. We know that if there is an attack on Medicaid, that it's going to hurt our rural hospitals. So those are the sorts of things that I think the administration and the governor can do, is to stand up and say, we're not going to let the federal government run over us on this. This is too important. We know our economy is dependent upon it. We know that people in Montana deserve to have access to good quality health care. We'll do everything to make sure that we're fighting for that each and every day. That's what Montanans deserve.
Thank you. All right, don't get too comfortable, Mr. Cooney. This one is sort of a follow-up on a couple that we had earlier, but it seems to be a pretty important issue in the state of Montana. Montana has limited resources to assist those in our community struggling with addiction. Our state-run treatment centers are crowded, underfunded, and often unable to offer timely bed dates. Addiction to alcohol, opioids, and methamphetamine, among other substances, impose a significant toll on our communities. What steps will you take, in addition to those that you've already mentioned, to help Montanans struggling with addiction?
Well, again, I just mentioned, and I think it's very important, most people don't think about that. 13,000 people, since we have had Medicaid expansion in Montana, 13,000 Montanans have taken advantage of drug addiction services. We know they want to help themselves. We know that they will take advantage of it. We need to continue to make sure that we're protecting Medicaid expansion at every cost possible, because it will have a devastating effect. We also know that 40,000 Montanans are taking full advantage of mental health service through Medicaid expansion. That is a big issue. That's another reason we have to protect it. You know, there are the other addiction issues. I mean, we know that law enforcement is going to have to be involved in some of this. They need to have the tools to fight some of these problems with meth and so forth. We need to make sure that they have that support. This is a tough problem. We need to make sure we're keeping this stuff out of here, making sure that they're not poisoning our children and our people here. But we also need to know that it's going to happen. We need to know people are getting the services they need, and they're getting the mental health treatment they need. That is what we can do to support the people in this state and help them with addiction.
Thank you. Whitney?
Yeah, we were in Billings last week and talking about this very issue. It's a gigantic problem for communities across the state. Billings is, as I'm sure Bozeman is suffering greatly. I met with your sheriff here not too long ago in Bozeman and had a conversation about this. Meth sometimes is on the rise, and then opioids are sometimes on the rise, and then meth is on the rise again. You go to Indian country, and our friends up there will tell you that meth is at an all-time high. So it's a crisis, and we need to make sure that we take care of folks. We need to make sure we have access to life-saving drugs like Narcan, which we do and we have, and that's in part because we've worked closely with the federal government and federal agencies to make sure that we have a supply. And then we do need to take care of folks who have mental health needs. We've got a $50 million budget cut in the last 2 years, and like folks down the road in Livingston are like shutting their doors. 100 folks got put out on the streets, don't have any access to mental health services. All these things are connected, folks. We know that, it's common sense. We got to make sure we do everything we can to support people and also keep our communities safe. Without having mental health providers in these communities, we're going to have more of a problem, and we got to fix that.
Thank you. Michael. Yes. The Montana Constitution affords us the right to a clean and healthful environment. Gallatin County is known for its access to Montana's extraordinary rivers. Despite valuing our environment and waterways, our rivers are stressed with historic user levels, rising river temperatures, and pollution, among other pressures. What policies would you support to improve and protect the health of our beautiful Montana rivers?
Well, I mean, we have seen a number of issues. Right now, we have an issue down in the Madison River where there is great conflict down there, and they're working out ways, bringing the parties together, the people who live on the rivers, the economies along the rivers, the folks who are the outfitters, the folks who are just the day-to-day fishermen, and they're working out solutions to try to answer that, to make sure that we are treating that resource properly. It's not just the human conflict, but it's also the stress on the rivers, it's the stress on the fisheries. We need to be mindful of that because these are truly part of the treasure of our great outdoor economy and our great recreational economy. So number one, I think, again, we talked about climate change and what we need to do. I think Montana needs to be more aggressive in making sure our summers are changing, our growing seasons are changing. It's hotter. Our fire seasons are changing. We know things are changing, and it's having an impact on all of our services and our rivers and our other natural resources. We need to make sure we're managing these things in a way that is right for Montana, that will allow us to continue to use these resources, but when they're stressed and when there are problems, we need to be able to take the appropriate actions to make sure that we're not overstressing them and make sure that we're doing the right thing by those, because again, our goal is to make sure we turn these over to the next generation in better shape than what we were given. That's what we have to do.
Thank you. Whitney?
Yeah, so the Madison, Mike just talked about, obviously there's lots of conversation with outfitters and guides and community members about what to do. We do need to protect the river, and we need to protect the way of life. I mean, we all make our memories on these rivers, and it's centrally important. I'm not an outfitter, but I am a businesswoman, and I am very used to solving tough problems and bringing folks together, including sort of unlikely allies, to make sure that we do that. And here, I think we've got to listen to local folks about the solutions. You know, my father, Pat Williams, used to say, there's a genius on every block. And it's true. I think there is. I think there's lots of good ideas out there. And I think by bringing people together and listening to community, we're going to solve this.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to, this is going to be the last question before we do our closing statements. So, Mike, what is the number one issue that you will champion as our next governor?
Wow. The number one issue, the people of Montana and what is good for them. And it includes education, health care, and it includes protecting our public lands. I mean, it is hard to say there is one major issue to champion as governor. That is not how government works. You have got to be prepared to champion a number of issues. I think we've been able to lay out tonight a number of the priorities that I will take, and those are things that we can do in the next legislative session. There are things we can continue to work on in the next administration. And so I don't know that that's a fair question, because that is not what government does. That's not how government should approach things. And I think that it's very important that the next governor be prepared to take on a number of these challenges. You know, Montana is too important to just focus and say there's only one challenge out there that we're going to focus on to begin with. You've got to take on these challenges, many at the same time. I'm prepared to do that as governor.
Thank you. Whitney?
Well, I'm glad you went first on that one, Mike, because I think it's true. It's hard to say that there's just one. So I'll quickly say that pharma, we got to hold pharma accountable. And we need a governor that's going to be tough enough and creative enough to come up with solutions so we don't have another 20 years since Brian took those bus trips, and make sure that we solve this problem. We've got to keep public lands in public hands. And we have got to get our littlest learners in pre-K. We all know it, we all believe it, and it's time that we get it done.
Thank you. So now I guess it's time for the stump speech, huh? Okay, so we'll let Mike, we'll have you go first. And you have 2 minutes to make a closing statement about why you should be Montana's next governor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. It's been a great discussion. Whitney, thank you very much for participating as well. I want to leave you with one thing. I want to leave you with that I am a person who has been fighting for Montanans all my adult life in public service. And I have a record to prove it. You know, Montana's my home. Montana is a place where I find its values is something worth protecting. We need somebody who is going to be protecting the progress that we have made in Montana. And we need somebody who's going to be fighting to create opportunity for our future generations. You know, Montanans are good people. Montanans work hard and they don't ask for a lot. And the next governor is going to have to work just that much harder for the people of Montana. They need to work to make sure that we're continuing to strike a deal and make the best paying jobs for our people here in Montana. We need to make sure that the next governor is going to be standing up to make sure that we're driving down healthcare costs and we're containing pharmaceutical costs. We need a governor who's going to say, I'm going to make record investment in public education, and we're going to have a pre-K program, and we're going to keep college tuition affordable. And we need a governor who's going to say, I'm here to protect our public lands so that we can pass on the best air, the best water to the future generation. And we need a Montana governor who is going to say, these values are important, and I'm going to fight each and every day for it. You know, what we don't need is we don't need a governor coming in from out of state who's a multimillionaire who doesn't understand our values because they don't live our values. Montanans have trusted me to be lieutenant governor. They've trusted me to be state senator. They've trusted me to be secretary of state and president of the Senate and other members and serve in the legislature. I know how to roll up my sleeves and go to work right off the bat as governor. I plan on doing that. Montana has great opportunity. Montana has a great opportunity in front of it. Working together with Montanans, there's nothing that we can't accomplish. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mike. Whitney?
Well, thank you all so much. It really is a pleasure to be here. I believe in so many ways, Montana remains what America started out to be, a place of family farms and clean rivers and those mountain horizons, and Main Street businesses working to meet the promises and the profits of the American dream. But in 2020, our Montana's at a crossroads. We're up against a new set of challenges, and I think that needs a new set of solutions. Our public lands are under attack from the Trump administration that is hell-bent on taking those lands and selling them off to wealthy private developers. Too many families are forced to choose between filling a prescription and putting food on the table. And folks all across this state are struggling under the weight of sky-high property taxes, and they're worried that their kids won't be able to afford to stay here in Montana. And Republicans are not going to sleep until they overturn Roe v. Wade and take away a woman's constitutional right to make choices about her own body. And make no mistake, Greg Gianforte represents an existential threat to Montana. He represents that threat to the Montana that we know and love and are proud to call home. And if we're going to beat him, we need new ideas. We need a new generation of leadership. We need one that brings a new, fresh perspective, a new outlook, and proven experience as an executive to take him on, because you know he's going to use every trick in the book and every dollar in that bank account. I think Montana faces very different problems than we did even 4 years ago, and we need big, bold solutions to stand up to the Trump administration as they try to transfer those lands, to hold Big Pharma accountable, and to guarantee every single woman the right to choose. I'm Whitney Williams, and I'm asking for your vote because I believe I'll be that leader, and I believe I'll do you proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Whitney. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our debate. But before we all scatter, I want you to join me in giving a warm round of applause to these courageous candidates who've come here to tell us how they're going to lead this state forward.
Thank you.